That's pay. Enter it now.
The host of this program is an interesting guy.
He collects rare birds and has a pet dolphin named Chachi.
You're listening to The Rob Dibble Show.
Back on The Rob Dibble Show. It's Ben Darnell on your afternoon drive on Fox Sports Radio. Joining us, Mike Golic, longtime NFL player, one of the best NFL analysts out there from Westwood One and Pro Football Talk. Mike, how are you, buddy?
Good, Dibs. How you doing, man?
Fantastic. Happy New Year to you. Let's start. I know Dan Quinn was the breaking news today, but you know your Eagles really well. Mike McDonald goes to Seattle. What does he bring besides being a young guy and a lot of great defensive stuff? But what do you know about Mike McDonald?
Well, Mike is you just talked to his players. This guy puts in the work. It reminds me, if coaches still did it and they don't, the old Dick Vermeil way of just sleeping in your office at night. And I know coaches don't do that anymore, but this guy is just a tireless worker to make sure everything is perfect in the game plan for the players. Players love him, respect him. That's what Seattle is getting. And how about being, Pete Carroll was 72. This guy's half his age, McDonald, 36. So what's interesting to me is now we've had all 8 positions filled, with Dan Quinn being the last one. 5 Dibs were defensive-minded coaches, 5 of them. So that, to me, is a little bit odd at times. 3 offense, 5 defense. So the most important thing for him and the other defensive coaches out there are going to be, who do you hire as the offensive coordinator? Because you basically, if you're a defensive coach, you hire an OC and that person just runs that side of the ball. Just like if you have an offensive coach, you hire that D coordinator and he just does his thing. Other than that, we'll sit there and say, well, how do we grade the first-time head coaches out there, with where they went and what we think they're going to do? The answer is no idea. We have no idea what Mike McDonald or Brian Callahan or Dave Canales is going to do, these first-time head coaches, Gerard Mayo, when they all of a sudden sit in the big seat. It's one thing to be a coordinator. It's another thing then to be the CEO of the team and have every question come at you that you didn't have to answer before. Now you do. So the truth is, we can sit there and say, boy, we think he'll be really good, but we have no idea until we wait and see.
How much have you thought about the game changing up front with the defensive line, specifically the edge rusher, and how dominant they've been in the last couple of years, and how we're talking about like power forward type bodies going up against the offensive tackle who's 300 pounds? Have you noticed that as far as the evolution of the game has really put some emphasis on those pass rushers?
Well, it has. For a while it was that tweener when I was playing that was too big for a linebacker and too small for a D lineman. Now these guys are getting a little bit bigger. I mean, the freak of them all is Myles Garrett at his size and what he's able to do. But the other edge rushers, Micah Parsons, T.J. Watt, guys like that, decent-sized guys who are putting great pressure on the quarterbacks. But I'll also say this. We're getting more from the interior D-line as well. Metabuke, the kid from Baltimore, the D tackle, he is in his last year of his deal this year, and Baltimore offered him an extension in camp, and he said, I'm going to turn it down. I'm going to bet on myself. He's going to go from making $1 million something this year to over $20 million next year. Christian Wilkins from Miami, another D tackle. I mean, you got interior guys getting a push as well, and with also the versatility is like a Chris Jones from Kansas City, who's going to play in the Super Bowl. Watch how many times he lines up over the right tackle. He'll push out to end. So you're getting versatility from the interior guys to be able to play those end positions as well. So while edge rushers are still going to get the most money, what these interior linemen are doing are starting to really kind of be a little bit eye-opening. And they're not on the bigger side. They're Aaron Donald, who's been the best D tackle for a while, is on the smaller side. But defense has really kind of ruled this year.
Talk about Josh Harris, the owner of the Commanders. His new hire is Dan Quinn. This guy owns part of the 76ers, the Devils, the Commanders now. So obviously he's got to like his sports. Is he going to be a meddler, or is he going to let Dan Quinn run this team?
I think he's going to let Dan Quinn run the team. You haven't heard him about getting, at least I haven't, about involved a lot. Obviously the one you hear all the time about is Jerry Jones, how much he gets involved. But I listen. I hope he doesn't. Magic Johnson is part of the group in Washington, and I think Magic could give him some sage advice in that. Say, listen, hire people to do the job, and basically stay out of the way. Don't meddle too much into this, and let the people you hire do the work. So we'll see. And listen, as far as owning, being in the sports business, it's pretty good. Look who just sold over the Orioles. Your sport of baseball.
Oh yeah.
The Angels, they bought that in 30 years ago for $173 million. Sold it for $1.7 billion. My quick math says in 30 years you made 10 times your money, which comes out to about, I think it came out to about, they made $51 million a year on that investment. So, and that's one of the lower numbers for a team, $1.7 billion. So being in that business is not a bad business to be in if you want to make some money.
What are your thoughts on the game? What do you think of the matchup? Was this something that you were predicting maybe at the beginning of the season, but not the middle? Like, what do you think of far as Mr. State Farm versus Mr. Irrelevant?
I the beginning of the year, I picked a rematch of Kansas City and Philadelphia. And it looked good for a while, bad for a while for Kansas City. Then they righted themselves. Good for a while in Philly when they were 10-1, and then they, circled the drain. This is one of those, it's tough to bet against Mahomes because, in the divisional, I had picked Buffalo. In the conference game, I picked Baltimore, wrong both times. I'm not going to pick this game because I'm working the sideline for it for Westwood One, so that would be very unprofessional of me. But, Patrick Mahomes, he just finds a way. But let's be honest. Remember, in that AFC title game, they got shut out in the second half.
Yeah.
That Kansas City and Baltimore defense and Kansas City defense, and they're the ones moving on. Kansas City defense, Spagnuolo's defense has been fantastic. But overall, you look at San Francisco, they have so many weapons on the offensive side of the ball that Brock Purdy can get to. So I think it's going to be one hell of a matchup. Then, obviously, on the defensive side, how do you try and contain Mahomes?
How about trying to contain McCaffrey and Samuel and all those other guys on the 49ers side? That's what I wanted to ask you, because McCaffrey's like a battering ram. He's got to wear you down. What's it like in the fourth quarter when you're dog-tired? It's the end of the season. I don't care if it's the Super Bowl. A lot of these guys got to be in pain trying to stop that 49ers offense.
Well, he wears you down, A, because he's great, and B, because they have moved the ball around to others as well. Deebo Samuel gets his share of catches and rushes as well. Ayuk gets the ball. Kittle gets the ball. Juszczyk gets the ball. So you get the battering ram of CMC, but then the ball gets spread around, and then you get another dose of him. He's a guy that turns what should be a 1-yard gain into a 5-yard gain. And then you play action off of that, and you got a wide-open tight end. Or McCaffrey bounces it to the outside and gets extra yards. And he does a great job hanging onto the ball in space to not fumble it. So that's what I mean. I mean, their depth at the offensive position for Brock Purdy with McCaffrey, with Deebo, with Ayuk, with Kittle. I mean, what a dream. And then you have the best left tackle basically in the game in Trent Williams. So, I mean, you're dealing – and that's why a lot of times Brock Purdy gets labeled the game manager, which is like an F word. In sports to be called the game manager. But listen, that's what Patrick Mahomes said, that all he had to do, because their defense was playing so great in Baltimore, he said all I had to do was manage the game. But when you're asked to make a big play, look what he did against, I believe it was Detroit, what Brock did in the big pass over the middle. No, it was against Green Bay, the big pass over the middle to Juwan Jennings. When he had to make the pass, he made the pass. Brock Purdy will be the first one to tell you he hasn't been great this postseason. I called the Green Bay game. He was off in that game. In the first half of the Detroit game, he was like 7 of 15 for 93 yards, and then he tore it up in the second half. So he can make the throws when he has to, but he has a lot of talent to spread the ball to.
He's definitely making people reconsider their seventh-round attention for sure when it comes to the draft. How much is Juszczyk making people reconsider the use of the fullback with how successful not only he's been, even in the passing game, but open up bigger holes and extending runs for Christian McCaffrey and everybody on the 49ers?
Listen, if he's not careful, he's going to find himself in the Hall of Fame when all is said and done. I think he's on 8 Pro Bowls right now. And eventually he could have a wife, and his wife, Kristen, who makes more money than he ever made. The way she's doing those jackets and now going to partner up with the NFL. I mean, talk about hitting the gold right there. But he is, listen, to have a fullback, that's an H-back as well. A lot of teams use an extra tight end for that, line them up like a fullback or an H-back and have them block. But with the ability Juszczyk has to catch the ball out of the backfield, that's the thing. I played in the NFL for 9 years and been covering it for decades, and I don't think I've ever seen a fullback covered out of the backfield. They're always wide open. It's just stunning. It's like the defense forgets about them or doesn't care about them, and they're wide open. But he's been fantastic, and not many teams use these fullbacks anymore. You got Ricard over in Baltimore, is like a 300-pound fullback, but they're just not used much anymore. But he's pretty damn athletic.
I thought Shanahan did a nice job against Detroit in the second half, making adjustments at halftime. Who do you like more, especially when you go into half and you might be down a touchdown or two between Reed and Shanahan?
Well, I mean, listen, Andy Reid, how many NFC Championships games was he in a Super Bowl, even though he lost it when he was in Philly, and now all the time he's doing it in Kansas City. This year they're doing it with a little less talent on the offensive side, but the defensive side has picked up the slack. It's tough to go against Andy Reid in situations like this, a guy that's going to walk into the Hall of Fame and maybe, push really moving himself up the list of all-time great head coaches. Well, listen, they're both excellent coaches, one pretty much a lot younger than the other, but it's tough to deny Andy Reid in these situations.
Talking to Mike Golic, Westwood One. You can hear him on this station when we do our big game coverage on Fox Sports Radio 97.9. Now, we wanted to have you, Golic, on Friday last week to preview the Notre Dame UConn women's game. Now, and then, we didn't get you, and then things worked out the way they worked out. And then we said, to hell with Golic on Monday. We don't want to talk about women's. What? Now, forget about you guys winning. We all know that. Our listeners don't want to hear that crap. But what do you think about women's basketball right now? Because you've been a fan for a long time. It's not only just UConn, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Stanford anymore. Like the parity and the stars, the Caitlin Clarks, the Paige Beckers of the world, the stars that are out there. Just what do you think as far as this era of college women's basketball right now?
Why don't we throw Hannah Hidalgo in there?
Okay, fine.
4 on you guys. How about that? You really expect me to just gloss over the game? I mean, do you know how many times I lost a bet to Rebecca Lobo when I was at ESPN and she painted my face UConn colors or whatever hell else I had to do for her when I lost the bet when UConn would beat Notre Dame? So I'm going to revel in this. They beat them. They beat them pretty good as well.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, to go to your point, I mean, this is a freshman in Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame. What a star she is, as we're seeing young talent come up, and then you got the Caitlin Clarks, who's, I think in the last 8 games she has to average 13 points a game to break Kelsey Plum's record for all-time leading scorer in NCAA history, and she's averaging 32 a game. So that's going to be nothing for her to do it. She just took over second place from Kelsey Mitchell from Ohio State. By the way, you want a great women's basketball player, name her Kelsey, because you had Kelsey Plum and Kelsey Mitchell, were 1 and 2 in all-time scoring. But women's sports, including women's basketball, is on such a rise right now. So much fun to watch. And the women's college basketball game was so exciting last year with LSU, who last I checked dropped 2 in a row. Hadn't done that in a while. I don't think they've done it under Mulkey as the coach. So, I look forward again to the end of the season, the conference championships, and then obviously onto the tournament again. But it's been great to watch.
Mike, you look fantastic. Every time I see you, you look better, man. Thank you so much for a few minutes of your time, and do a great job during the Super Bowl, man. It's always that's the best week in sports.
Yeah, the great job I'm going to do is try not to lose too much money at the blackjack game.
There you go.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
See ya.
All right, Mike Golic, everybody, one of the best in the business. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do First Dibs question of the day.
Well, here comes